Good morning, everyone. I'm Angus Logan. I'm a technical product manager with the Windows Live platform team. What I'm going to be covering today is opening up Windows Live data. So how we can go and access a whole lot of information that lives within the Windows Live online services for online services based around a user, and how you can go and access those from different applications. So we'll just be drilling through what's happening with Windows Live this week at TechEd. I apologize if anyone was in the other session where I ran through this, but TechEd is a really big show for us. We're releasing a lot of cool stuff right now. I'll do a review of the platform. So exactly what do we mean when we talk about the Windows Live platform, and what are all the pieces that hang together on that? We'll have a look at the data that we have. So this session's about Windows Live data. So exactly what do we have, and why is it useful, and why would you want to use it in other places, and why are users demanding that content gets reused around different web properties? We'll drill into the current situation today and how data is being used already on third-party websites, so non-Microsoft websites. But what's wrong with that? What's broken about that? And why do we need to go and delegate or use an authentication mechanism called delegated authentication? And then we'll drill into two pieces of data that we currently expose from the Windows Live data service, which is Windows Live contacts, so a unified address book, and Windows Live Spaces photos, so opening up all of the photos. And we'll just have a look at the business terms here as well. Now, I do like sessions to be interactive, so please, I know it's early in the morning, but yell out if you have any questions. If I say something that you don't understand or you think I'm wrong, then call it out, and we'll drill into that topic. So what's happening this week at TechEd with Windows Live? So you may have seen my Windows Live tools for Microsoft Visual Studio presentation. That's a set of tools that helps you open up or use a lot of the Windows Live capabilities, the services and the controls within Microsoft development environments. So Visual Studio 2008 and Visual Web Developer 2008. There's a set of tools now, and it's the first public CTP where you can just go and install these, and it makes it really easy to integrate Windows Live capabilities into your applications. So just go to dev.live.com to go and check that out. Now, Catherine, the other day, Catherine at the back, one of my colleagues, announced the Windows Live Messenger IM control. So this is something you can drop on your blog. People could go and send you a message anonymously. It's a fairly fun experience. So this is where we're opening up the Windows Live Messenger environment. And we've also got a presence API around that as well. So you could programmatically query the presence of a user who's granted their permission to that. And then what I'm announcing in this session today is the Windows Live Windows Live Spaces Photo API, which is a read-write API to the photos that we have stored within Windows Live Spaces. And this sits behind a common delegation framework, and we'll drill into that during this session. And then in the next couple of days, we'll be releasing a new quick application, which is a sample application, which is designed to help you get started, but also to demo a lot of the capabilities we have. And we've got about 4 or 5, we've got 3 quick apps out there now, but 4 or 5 will be out within a couple of weeks. So these are a lot of applications that we're releasing. So TechEd is a really big show for us. We're pumping out a lot of stuff. Windows Live just releases continuously, especially the platform team, because we have a lot of big properties like Messenger, Spaces, Hotmail, and we can start releasing the APIs without affecting those front-end services. We're just constantly releasing. So we release a lot more often than the boxed product areas of Microsoft, which is a good and a bad thing. It's bad for me because I'm up till 5 a.m. So what are we doing with the platform? We look at the Windows Live platform in 5 buckets, so groupings of services. Now, historically, Microsoft has always been dealing with the end user directly. So if you look at the Windows Live applications, or what we call the first-party services, where Microsoft runs these services, like Messenger and Hotmail, it's always been us dealing with hundreds of millions of users directly. And there was no programmability story. No one else could really leverage our network unless it was a one-off business deal. For example, like Match.com uses a lot of our stuff. Expedia used Live ID. So unless there were these one-off business deals, it was very hard for third parties to leverage our services. Now, the team I work in is the platform team, and we want to open up Windows Live. So instead of a user needing to sign into Messenger, for example, to use the Messenger network, we want to open that up so we've got programmability tools around that. So instead of a user needing to use Photo Gallery or use Spaces to access their photos, they could go and just use these APIs that we're releasing. So it allows your website or your company or your ISV that you're running to leverage our network in terms of the infrastructure we have, and then also the user base we have. We've got about 400 million registered users with Windows Live ID. So that is a massive set of users. They have a lot of data in our systems, and we really want to open that up. We want you to leverage our network. Now, just running through this, this platform slide, the farthest to the left is rich media experiences. So this is where we're opening our data center to allow Silverlight developers to publish their applications up into the Windows Live data center. So any Silverlight developer today can go to silverlight.live.com. They can sign up for a free account, and that will give them 4 gigabytes of storage in the cloud, or in the Windows Live cloud, or up in the sky. However I refer to it, I'll use a mixture of all of them. But if you're a developer, sign up, you get 4 gigabytes of space free in the sky. And then we can stream this around the world at a massive amount of bandwidth. I think it's now at 1.4 terabits per second. I said 1 terabit per second like 2 days ago, and I got corrected by someone else that it's 1.4 terabits per second. So we're just opening up our infrastructure, opening up our data center for people to go and use. Now, in terms of storage and sharing, this is where users, so the 400 million users we have, use our infrastructure to store their information. So they're storing their contacts, so their addresses, and that's Windows Live contacts. They're storing their photos in Spaces, and that's the Windows Live Spaces photos capability. So we're opening this up so it's user-centric content. So a user can access their content from several different services. And I'll drill into that a little bit later on. In terms of Messenger, I mentioned the IM control, so we're opening that up. We've got a Presence API. We're doing some things in the future around Messenger as well. And then also we have some interesting functionality called Alerts, Windows Live Alerts, which is a multi-channel messaging framework for sending alerts to people that have a Messenger account. So in North America, it does SMS. Everywhere else, it does SMS, toast, and like toasting within Messenger, and also email. So it's an interesting way of going and notifying users real time of some event that's happened in your application. We've got finding and locating capabilities, so where we've opened up the live.com search engine, and we've got an API around that. And we've also got Virtual Earth, which is our mapping technology, where we've got about 14 petabytes of GIS information up there. So we've got, I know the coverage isn't fantastic in Europe, but in lots of places we have great satellite photography and bird's eye, and then also 3D modeling in a lot of cities. Now, all of these services are held together with one common authentication framework. This is Windows Live ID. So Windows Live ID is at the centerpiece of all of the Windows Live services. So a user can sign into Hotmail with their Live ID, and they could also sign into Spaces, they could sign into Messenger, they can authenticate in rich clients like Windows Live Writer to post to their Spaces, they could use Live ID and Windows Live Photo Gallery to post up to their photos store. So it's one authentication system across a lot of different clients. And you can also use it on a mobile device as well with the Windows Mobile 6 integration pack. So we've got this set of APIs and this taxonomy of how we talk about it. Now, what we've done is we've released one set of terms of use, so the simple and consistent terms of use. So the way we look at this is that this is a free service up to a threshold. And there's an arbitrary number for a couple of different things. Like some of the APIs are free until 1 million unique users. Some of the mapping technology, because it's not really related to how many users there are, it's free up until a certain number of mapping tiles. And I'll drill into the business terms a little bit later on. But we do have one set of terms of use that you can go to dev.live.com/terms. And this outlines how you can use our services. And in the future, we're looking at setting up SLAs around the services that are currently in alpha and beta. So you'll be able to sign up for 1 or 3 years to a service level agreement with us. So what are we doing in terms of data? Like, we have massive amounts of data within the Windows Live environment. In terms of contacts, for example, it makes no sense for me to have one address book on Plaxo, another address book in Facebook, and then my address book in Hotmail and Messenger. That's the kind of principle we're looking at for this Windows Live data. Why would I, as a user, have my world segmented across all of these applications when I should just have it out in the sky somewhere, and then all of these applications should be able to go and leverage it? So in terms of live contacts, we've created a unified address book between Hotmail, which is your buddies. So the people you go and chat to, you can have groupings in there. You could also have contacts in there. And then also Hotmail has all of your email addresses. So anyone that you email that you save, if you receive an email, you could easily add them to the address book. So there's masses of data there. There's about 30 billion associations and hundreds of millions of address books. So each user that uses Hotmail or Messenger has an address book. So in terms of Spaces photos, I think, what was the number? Was it 4 billion photos? Yeah, in Spaces, there is about 4 billion photos uploaded there. That's a lot of photos. Now, an interesting thing about Spaces is that a lot of the spaces are private. So you can have access controlled spaces. So you can lock them down. They're what we call privileged spaces. So only you and your buddies or you and your family could go and see that space. Now, why would you go and have a Spaces account and a Flickr account and a photo bucket account? It's like storing half your photos on your C drive, half on DVDs, and then half on an external drive. You never get that overall kind of view to this. So we think users are going to want to put photos up into Windows Live Spaces, manage the albums, all of that standard stuff through our interface. But also they're going to want to leverage these photos in different places. They're going to want to see these photos on different sites. So these are the principles we're thinking about when we talk about opening up the Windows Live data environment. Now, these are quite there are some hot topics around here like privacy. Now, we see this as the user, it's the user's data. If a user puts data into Windows Live, that's their data. And if they want to grant permission to another website to go and access it, then that's their call on doing that. And we give them a whole lot of privacy, what we call scary screens, so that the user can see exactly what they're getting into. They can go and review privacy policies and then grant permission. Now, what Windows Live Data is, the system, is it's a way of securely granting a third party, so it's someone that is not Microsoft, access to the data that you have stored within Windows Live services. So it's a framework, it's an authentication gateway into all of these back-end services that we have. Right now it's sitting at alpha, and it only does 2 data sources. It does live contacts and photos. But around the mix timeframe in March, we'll be shipping this into a 1.0. That's the current target. And we'll be adding a lot more data services in the back end there as well. So additional things that you could go and access using this delegation framework. So, you may be thinking, hang on, Angus is talking about all this stuff that's been around for ages. I go and sign up to insert social network here. I go and sign up to that site, and the next screen it says is, hey, what's your live ID? Give us your live ID. What we'll do is we'll go and check your Hotmail, and then we'll bring the party back to your site. So a user ends up giving their live ID credentials to that website. So you're on whatever website, you type in your live ID username and your live ID password, and you're giving them your credentials. Then they go and stick it in a database. So when you add new friends, they can go and make sure that they get that friend to invite to your social network or to make sure that you're connected with them. Now, what happens is that website goes and logs into your Hotmail account or your live contacts or some other service, and they actually screen scrape out a whole lot of content. So they've got some screen scraping regular expression gurus that go and log into your Hotmail account, pull out your contacts. Like, as the end user, you're cool with that, because what they're doing is you're signing up to a new social network, and you want the people you email, the people on your buddy list, you want those people existing in that social network as well. So you're happy as the end user. But what happens is this hacker rocks up. Some hacker on the net rocks up, and they go and hack that website. And they go and steal your credentials. So even if it isn't the website that has your credentials that is doing something evil, if they have a copy of your credentials, and it can be quite kind of painful or quite dangerous. And it's hard for them to go and manage the credential storage. So when you're managing a store of someone else's usernames and passwords, it's quite difficult to do. Now, this hacker's got your credentials, and they go and use them somewhere. Now, not many people would actually use the same credentials for Live ID as banking. This is an exaggerated example, but imagine there's some different scenario here where they've got your credentials now with your Live ID. Not many people use different credentials across a lot of websites, so now they can go and use those credentials somewhere else. So it's not just about that website kind of getting free access to Windows Live data. It's the fact that these websites have your usernames and passwords, and it's dangerous for other people to store your Windows Live ID usernames and passwords. So this is the way it's done today in a lot of different environments. Now, what we want to do is we want to stop that. We only want users to type in their credentials, their Windows Live ID credentials, into login.live.com and the Windows Live Client SDK, so the Windows Live Client applications. The reason for this is users need to be trained that they're not meant to share their credentials. So we've got some Live ID syndication, or where you could use Live ID on your website, and we enforce people to type their creds into live.com or login.live.com. So we're fairly hardcore about this. And the way our delegation works is you may be sitting on a third-party website, so a non-Microsoft website, and you just click a link, and it goes out to live.com. And what that does is it takes you to a screen saying, this website wants access to your information. They want to go and access your photos in a read scenario, or they want to access your photos and they want read-write capabilities. So it shows you a whole lot of things that explain exactly what's going on. It links you out to the website's privacy statement, because you need to be aware of exactly what they're going to do with your data. If their privacy statement says, we're going to copy it all and resell it, and when we get acquired, we can sell this data as well, then you may not want to grant permission to them. But if it just says, we're going to display this to you in one session, and then we're going to throw away the key, then that's a good scenario to be in. Now, once you're on that site and you grant permission to the site, it returns a thing called a domain authentication token. And what this is just a key to open your contact store or your photo store, whatever access control you've allocated. So it's a key to open that up, and it's only for that website. So it's encrypted against their domain as well. And then they just go and use that key against a common endpoint. So right now it's cumulus.services.live.com, the user's email address, and then whatever store you're after. And we'll drill into this a little bit later on. So what I'm going to do is just jump into a demo of how this delegation scenario works and run you through the approval screen, so the permission requesting screen. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to yell out, because I'm more than happy to get sidetracked on this. So what we'll do is we'll just go out to dev.live.com. Now, dev.live.com is the developer resource for all things Windows Live. So you go here, and it's got all of the SDK references. It actually drills back through to MSDN. So all of our SDKs, or most of our SDKs, are stored in MSDN. It's got links to the forums. It's got a whole lot of customer stories. So dev.live.com has a lot of information. But we're linking a page shortly, which is called the live data SDK. So dev.live.com/live-data/SDK. And this is an interactive SDK. So similar to what we've done with Virtual Earth, where all you need to do to be able to understand Virtual Earth and get great code samples is go to the dev.live.com/virtualearth/SDK. This is just what you do to understand the Windows Live Data scenario. And it runs you through each of the workloads or each of the data sources and how you read and write, and gives you explanations of that. So let's go, and the first thing we need to do is grant permission to a website. So right now, dev.live.com is the website we're on. So we could choose to request permission. Now let me just click this, and then I'll grab a copy of the URL. Now once I've gone and clicked this, it takes me out to a live.com website. So this is the user experience on Windows Live Data. Cumulus is the code name because we're still in alpha. And then the permission granting interface, and then the return URL. So I'm just going to grab this, and we'll decipher it a little bit more. So what we're doing here is you browse out to this website, and it asks you for a return URL. So where is it going to go and post all of this information back to? Now this return URL must have a dot in it somewhere. So it can't just be localhost, or it can't be a Logan laptop. So I'll show you when we start developing against this, some of the little tricks that you'll run into, or the bugs that you'll run into that you can work around fairly easily. So you go out, you need to specify a return URL, and this just takes you back to a specific page. Now on this page, you need to go and handle the response that comes back. So what happens is Cumulus, or the permission granting interface, will send down your token to the browser, and then the browser will do a client-side post back to the other application. So there's no server-to-server permission granting. Now, we also need to specify a privacy statement. So PL is the privacy statement, and the interface won't even render without the privacy statement specified. And then we need to specify the permission request. So this is requesting live contacts in read-write. It could be live contacts.read. So what you're doing here is the website just builds a URL, sends the user out to that, and then the user can look at that screen and determine whether they want to go and grant permissions. So it just says, this website wants read and write access, or they only want read access. Are you sure you want to go and give this? It's got a couple of scary dialogues, like giving information can compromise your privacy. Now, the reason we do this, we get a lot of heat over this screen because some websites say there's going to be a high bounce rate. So people will look at that, get really scared, and leave. This is serious stuff. Like, we're not, with great power, or great user base, rather, comes great responsibility. We don't want to open up all of our users to third parties that just aren't responsible. Yes, it's the question guy from the other session. Yeah. So the question was, I understand about the scary screen, but I want to make it more relative to my customer. So the site that's directed it. So I want to have a logo, and I also want it in different languages, not just English. I'm surprised this doesn't have a market URL, like a parameter in the URL where you specify the language. So I'm almost certain that this will get in several languages. It'll get into 32 languages, or the 22, or at least the big 9. I think it'll be the 22 though. So that's coming. That's a no-brainer. But in terms of the logo, there is a group of people looking into this right now on whether we can put a logo in there, because we do understand, because we focus so much on users need to be trained to look at things on live.com to trust that address. We interrupt the user experience on a lot of things, like logging in, on transferring contacts, on transferring photos, on the delegation scenario. So we are looking at ways of making that user experience better. And we're working with some design houses right now, because we don't want your websites to implement this stuff and have a bad user experience, just because we have a lot of privacy constraints and legal requirements to live up to. Cool. All right. So this just comes here, and the user can either grant permission, or they can skip it, or they can cancel out. And when I give access, this posts me back to that return URL, and it returns a thing called the domain authentication token, which is just it's a key for that domain, for the permission they requested, and it's got some checksums and some time stamping in this. So every time you go and request a domain authentication token, even if that website already has one for that access, it would be a different key that comes back each time, because it just contains some different timestamps. So that caught me off guard the first time I used this. Now, with the interactive SDK, we're just looking at the help side of it now, but we could go to the source code side as well. And so this shows everything we need to do here. So whenever you get back content from a website that isn't your website, you need to go and regex it to check for cross-site scripting, or make sure that you're expecting the right response. We've got the keys in here, so we go and grab the response code, the owner handle, which is the user's email address, the domain authentication token. Then we can just check that. And what you would do here is, depending on the scenario, you could either stick it in session, or however you want to keep your volatile keys. So if you were telling a user, we'll just display a list of your friends one-off, then you could stick it in session or your volatile store. But if you wanted to do something like have a background process that runs weekly or nightly to either get users' photos or get their contacts, then you would need to store this against the user's profile. Now, right now, this is currently just one token. So we return a token, and it could have multiple access controls in it. So it could have multiple stores it could access. In the future, we may be looking at a multiple token scenario. So we may be saying, here's a token for photos, and here's a token for contacts, and here's a token for insert service here. So I'm just giving you kind of a heads up in how to think about architecting your data store if you're looking at doing this. So that's how the delegation model works. You're on the website, you hit grant permission, you then get taken out to our permission granting interface. The user reads the privacy statement thoroughly, and then they hit grant access, and they get redirected back, and you persist the token somewhere. So let's jump back over here. So once you have that token, you need to start interacting with some data source, because just having a token for the purpose of having a token isn't kind of useful. You want to start doing something with it. So the first data service that we've got is Live Contacts. So Windows Live Contacts, this is the unified address book between Hotmail and Messenger. And it's a REST API. So we can get to go and read all of the contacts, or read a subset of the contacts, like the one contact, or we could read a specific field out of the contact. We could go and put, so we could update into an existing contact, post to go and create a new contact, and then we could delete as well, and this will just remove the contacts. Now these functions, like the get, put, post, delete, these operate the same way as the interface in Hotmail, so adding a new contact there, or the interface in Messenger. You update a contact in Messenger, it's going and performing the same operation against the backend store. So this is exactly the same as what our other applications are doing. So what I'm going to do is just run you through what the interactive SDK gives you in terms of working with contacts. So how can you go and use the interactive SDK to go and learn how to interact with the contacts on creating, deleting, updating. And then also I'll show you a quick application, so a demo site we've built, which does a read on your contacts and allows you to go and plot them on a map using a different address book. Once again, any questions, just yell out. All right. So we're in the interactive SDK, and we should still have our domain authentication token in the session state here. So now, on the top left here, we can just say, we want to, and there'll be another section appearing here shortly, which is for photos. but we could go and retrieve our contacts. So what it does is it takes the domain authentication token and just keeps it in the session state, but it builds out a request URI. So this is the URI that you request at. So cumulus.services.blah / my email address, so my token, and then the URI that the service that I'm querying against, so live contacts. So if we do a get at this level, then it will just go and list out a bunch of XML. So it gives us the status, and this is great for debugging because it just starts, sometimes you do kind of weird errors and it just throws out the exception here. So it gives us all of the XML. I could go and see live contacts. I could see my record, so the owner record, so it's got my email address there. I could go and, let me just grab Donald Duck, my demo one. So I've got a contact here. It gives me the identifier of that contact. It gives me the choice of whether it's auto-updated or not. So within Messenger, you can subscribe to updates on a user's contact information. So if I'm on your buddy list and like I'm in your contact store, then you can say when Angus changes his email address or he changes his his phone number, then make sure that gets updated in my store. So it's not this permanent kind of connection. You actually take a copy of it. So we've got a whole lot of fields here. Now you may notice that there's this button here. Like each of these levels in the XML you can go and click on. So when I go and click on contacts, what that does is up the top here, it starts specifying how we go and filter down into each of these services. So under live contacts, we drop into contact, we grab the contact, and then we filter on the identifier. So then if I go and execute this query, it only brings back that one specific contact. So this is standard like web-based integration stuff. So we've now got this one contact, we've got all of their emails, we've got their phone number, all of that stuff. So reading contacts is kind of interesting, but I want to start to write to a contact. So what I do to learn this is I just go to the update a contact button here. So I can choose to update a contact, and this just allows me to go and select one of my contacts. So I've just got a list of names here. So I can go and select it, it grabs back the XML for that contact. And I can just copy this over and paste it back in here. So what this is this is the XML it sent us back, and then this is the XML I want to go and send in a post request. So what I'll do is I want to go and just change the name of this contact. So under profiles, what I'm going to do is just change it to Donald to Angus Duck. There we go. So I've got this XML. And what we're doing is we're actually only sending the delta. So we've had that big chunk of XML and we're only sending that delta. So now when I go and execute this, so I submit it with a put to go and update that existing record, the URI that I'm sending it to is contacts and contact and then the identifier. So it's all based on the URI, and these are static URIs. So if Catherine was to go and access this contact, then it would be the same URI for that. So these aren't kind of based on whoever's accessing the contact. So let's just go and put that. See that it came back with no content, which means success. So then if I go and grab Messenger here, right now it's known as Donaldo or Duck. So Messenger will only cache these things kind of infrequently. So I think every 5 minutes or something like that. So you could either hack the registry to make it cache it a little bit more, or sign out and sign in, or add a new contact, whatever those things are. Oh. So, wow, that's weird. So now we've gone and got that updated record. So this is updating that backend store that's used in a lot of different clients. And if we just go to http contacts.live.com, which is, it's not actually a front-end service. It's just takes you through to the specific page in your Windows Live Mail. Then we could go and find that contact here. Let me find it. So we've got this contact here. If I go and drop that, then it will go and get dropped via the API as well. And I could go and drop, or I could drop it through the API and it'll drop out of Messenger. So it is a fairly synchronized experience between the API and the front-end service. Yeah, so I've gone and dropped that record. So what we're doing here is you can read, write against this centralized contact store. And right now you may be thinking, hang on, this is just address book. This is kind of lame. So the scenario for this, like how you could actually implement this in your website is, say you run a website that's about, I don't know, like IT articles. You have IT articles up there in a forum. If I visited that website, I'd want to know what the people on my buddy list have submitted recently, or what forums they're in, or what things they've commented on. Because the people on my buddy list are the people I care about. They're the ones I talk to. So I'd want that site to list out those people and give me an option to go and filter them, or give me a mini feed of exactly what they've done on that website. So these are the scenarios that your users are wanting, because they're used to moving from LinkedIn. So everyone was on LinkedIn 2 years ago, and now they all went to MySpace, and now Facebook is the new hot thing. So users are hopping around, and they're starting to get annoyed with going and needing to rebuild their social networks on each of those sites. And what are they using to rebuild their social network right now? They're entering their live ID, it's going and scraping their Hotmail and pulling in that network. So this is a more secure way for us to go and help out users to bring the party to those websites. And then there's the more traditional address book, like on my online banking thing, I want to list my addresses so I can choose who to post a check to, that kind of thing. All right. So that was Windows Live Contacts. And that's a fun kind of API for building social networks or for address book stuff. But photos is a little bit more of an interesting topic. More people use photos than they would use a unified address book in terms of online sense. So what we've done with photos is we've always had pseudo APIs into the photo store within Windows Live Spaces. So this isn't like the first API we've ever released. We've always had RSS feeds to list all of the albums, and they list the photos that exist within those albums. So I'm not telling you this is something new. But what those RSS feeds did is they were read-only. So you had to be part of Microsoft in the family to go and write to the Spaces photo store. So we've now created an API that makes it easy for you to update and upload new photos and create new albums within Spaces photos. And the other thing that the RSS feeds are broken for is to go and access private or privileged spaces. So there is a large number of spaces that have the permissions locked down by default. So in some markets around the world, when you create a Windows Live space, it's locked. It's not about creating a blogging engine. It's about creating your the place where you go and put information and you share it with your close family, or you share it with your buddy list. So what the API does is it gives you operations on a couple of objects. So it gives you operations on the albums and on the photos. But before we drill into that, I just want to show you a little bit of the Spaces photos capabilities, because we have released some stuff, I think probably 1 day ago. It went gold and it was announced. We've released something that's going to drive photos into Spaces a lot more heavily. So this is called the Windows Live Photo Gallery, and I just want to show you this really quickly, because this uses some APIs, and it's also it's a way that we're going to start driving photos off cameras straight up to Spaces, and then once you get more photos in Spaces, you want to start to do more with those photos. So if I just go here, and I just type in photo, what Windows Live Photo Gallery does is it's a superset of Windows Photo Gallery. And that second one was actually meant to be removed. So what Windows Photo Gallery does is it allows you to go and manage all of your photos. You can manage videos. You can do some really cool stuff with it. So just for a gratuitous plug, I could actually go and take this video and I could rotate it. Now, I'm not actually going to do that because we're here for an API session, but there is some really cool stuff that this app does. Now, from here, I can manage all my photos. I could tag them. I could do cool stuff. But what I can also do is I could just right-click. I could choose to publish onto Windows Live Spaces. So this will go and push that photo up to Windows Live Spaces. And just to show you something fun that we've done as well, we've also made it possible to go and publish onto Flickr as well. So Windows Live Photo Gallery is great for managing photos, and pushes up to Spaces, and it pushes up to other services as well. But we think most people will use Spaces. So if we take this photo and we just right-click and we choose to push it up to Spaces, then if this was the first time I had used it, it would ask me for my live ID, so it knows who I am. I could go and give it a name like a Tekademia. I could go and set the permissions. I could choose whether we upload the rich version or whether we just upload a soft version. Do we use an existing album or do we go and create an album? So I'll just call this album Tekademia, and that's the photo we'll upload. And it's just going and uploading this photo to my Windows Live Space. Now, this is just about driving more content into Windows Live Spaces, so then more people look at your space, and then you could also access richer information via the API. So I'll just wait for this to upload so I can show you the front-end experience of Spaces, and then we'll get down to the API and some of the scenarios that we've got for reading and writing. So one of the Silverlight guys is probably next door streaming 8 megabits per second into his video. But I'll come back to this when it comes up. So with the Photo API, it uses the same delegation model as the Contact API. So everything I showed you around granting permission, the user going out to live.com, it's the same thing. We just have that different security request, the ACL request. So one difference that it has between the Contact API is that this is WebDAV. So there is a mixture of protocols that we are using across the Windows Live services. And you may be thinking, you know, the other one was REST or whatever it was, and sorry, the other one was REST and there was this XML coming back, and now this one's WebDAV. Like, it seems a little bit broken. Now we are looking at unifying the protocols, but right now it's the right protocol for the right job. Uploading binary photos, we're doing that with WebDAV. You don't need to worry about a lot of the goo because you can just wrap it all in .NET. And you could go out to dev.live, or you could probably go to my blog and grab some code later on, which wraps a lot of that WebDAV kind of goo in terms of needing to construct the queries. Now, it gives you full CRUD on the albums and on the photos, and you can also access those private photos that I mentioned before. So the data structure that we're looking at here is a user has one space. Each live ID can only have one space. And then they can have many albums beneath that, and the information we get back is just the URI of the album and the album name. There's a couple other parameters, but a lot of them aren't that useful. And then underneath an album, we've got lots of photos. We get the photo URI. We get the photo caption, which is what you type into the Spaces interface. And then we also get the display name for that as well. Now, we can execute all of these operations against it. Now, if you were using the RSS feed, like what you did in the past, you'd request, like the user would browse to your website. So this scenario is about your website displaying photos from Spaces. So you wanted to aggregate these photos to make the user feel like they were at home. So the user would browse to your website, you'd make a request over to Spaces, grab the RSS feed, you'd send it back in HTML, so the reference to the image, and then the user would go and grab that from the Spaces server. So they'd be able to go and reference an image that's up on that server. Now that's a good experience for you because all you're doing is just going and fetching some RSS. You could do this out of band, so it was fast. And then you're not serving up the binary images. This is pretty cool, but you're not going to get really high resolution images there. You're not going to get writing capabilities as well. And this will only work on the public spaces. So this is a great option if you don't need those requirements. Or sorry, if you don't need the opposite of those requirements. Now, if you were using the photo API, so this WebDAV API, the user would request to your website. You'd already have a domain authentication token for them. You would execute a request against the photo API with the domain authentication token. So it unlocks that engine. And then it would send back a binary stream for you. Now, this could send back the high resolution stream, or you could thumbnail it as well. And then you can render back the binary stream. Now, a lot of people may just go and persist that photo onto their service. So imagine a printing shop, for example. You go to I don't know, like kodaksprintingshop.com, and it requests all of your private photos, and then it only thumbnails them and displays them back to you. And meanwhile, they're caching or they're keeping the high resolution photo. But some other scenarios, you may want to actually display that photo back to the user and send the binary stream back. Now, there are some, I'm surprised no one's yelled out yet. There are some, what are you going to yell at? Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, like, why do I need to go and fetch the binary stream? Or is there a way around not fetching the binary stream if it's a private photo and I can still serve it back to the end user? Right now, there's no way around that. So there are some things we're doing and some different controls that are time-based access controlled URIs. So it will only work for an hour and then it will disappear. But we haven't baked that into this API yet. So there are some things we're looking at, and I completely agree with you that why do I need to double pay for this bandwidth? Why do I need to go and fetch the photo and then stream it out again? So there are some things we're looking at, but because these are private or privileged spaces, there's a lot of constraints we have in terms of opening up that store, because we don't want to send you a URI that you'll have access for an hour. Someone else hacks it or they discover it or something like that. They start downloading private photos. That's just a bad place to be in. So you return this binary stream. Now the other issue that I raised when I first saw this is memory intensity. So this uses a lot of memory. Like on your front end servers, it would go and grab the stream and then it would need to stream it back out. So there are a few kind of cons of using this service, but the primary goal is that you can access these private photos and you can display them back to users and you can take a copy of them and do whatever you need to do if that is the value add that you give to your users. Yo. All right, so was the question that you, like, can we access control single albums or photos? Yeah, right now a private space is a private space. I think that button in photo gallery is actually misleading. Did you see, are you talking about the permission button that was in photo gallery here? Okay. So the question is why, like if it's my private space, if these are my private photos, why can that third party take a copy of the photo? Yeah. Because the user that owns those photos is delegating permission to read them, then when they read that privacy statement of that third party website, it will say, we will be caching a local copy of your photos. Okay? So it's the user's call as to whether they allow websites to go and cache it or whether they need to keep it in volatile memory or something like that. Yes. Yes, you can do that choice. Now there are some constraints. Like technically, it's all possible. In terms of the way we look at this from a business point of view with the terms of use, I'd encourage you to go and check those out because right now with photos, I believe it doesn't stop you from persisting the photos. But for example, contacts, there are some persistence, like legal requirements around that. You had a question? Yeah, so the question is, if I grant thirdparty.com access for my private photos, access to my photos, do they access my private photos and my public photos? Right now, the access control is set up at a space level, so an entire space level. I know the Spaces team are looking at some access control things around authorization. I'm not certain how granular we're going to get, although there is talk about saying like you can access this chunk of contacts and not this set of contacts, and you can write to this one but not that one, but you can read them all. So there is some more complex access control things we're looking at. All right. Yes. I'll get to that at the end. Yes. Yep. So the question is, what if the user revokes the permission they've delegated to you? And I'll show that interface shortly. So let's keep going. Just in terms of writing, this is kind of the more interesting scenario. When I browse to Facebook and I upload a photo, I don't want that photo stuck in Facebook. I want that photo to be put in other places. So users are saying, like, I use so many different social networks, I use so many different websites. Why are we keeping these silos of content? So please centralize my images somewhere else, or centralize my contacts. So if I upload to third party, they can now go and write that back into a special album, or they can create a new album in Spaces. And then that will go and get surfaced out into anyone else that's going and using this API. So what I want to show you is a quick demo of a little website that I built in the past couple of days. And all it is imagine a photo printing website version 2. So instead of them printing your photos, what they do is they fix up your digital assets. So you take a photo and there's red eyes all through it, or you've got 20 photos of a wedding and you want to get an artist to look at it and figure out which one's the best or do a bunch of work on it. And then they need to go and persist that back to your site. So what they do is they use the get, so they can read all of your photos, they display them, they give you a preview of a fix, and then you can apply that back to your space, and that's persisted. So I'll show you how I went and built this, and I'll just run you through a demo of it as well. Also, this is just that photo that I uploaded before. So let's jump into Visual Studio here, and I'll just run this without debugging on, and then I'll run you through all of the code. Now, right now, when you run Visual Studio, if you're running it against your local box, it will start up against localhost. So you need to change this to a kind of fully qualified domain name. So if I change this to angustest1.com, the reason for this is the delegation requires a proper server name to redirect you to. And just to show you how I set this up as well really quickly, I went and just hacked my host file. It's not super clean, but I went and hacked it just to say local 127001 is equal to Angus Logan test 1. This is just a tip if you're going to go and do any of this dev. Now, this is just a photo website. It's another skin that I had left over from a different project. But what it says is, welcome to the photo lab. Click here to grant permission. Now, if you're building something, if you're going to dev with this, what I recommend you do is add a debug button that will go and just use a local cache of the domain authentication token, just so it's a little bit faster for when you're testing this end to end. But if I just click here, then this is going and using a JavaScript. It used the JavaScript function to take me out to that URL. And you'll see this interface here. It looks like there's an error. The reason it looks like there's an error is my return URL doesn't have doesn't have HTTPS, SSL. So the reason for that is we're saying, hey, we don't want normal end users to have all of their data sent on an unsecure link. So have this domain authentication token transferred to this website in an unsecure way. So it'll just say deny request. We built this on purpose to make sure normal users don't get fooled. But down the bottom here, there's this approve the request button. So this allows you to bypass the lockdown. And also in the query string, we have a no SSL parameter, which allows you to, it will make the site not throw an error and allows you to work around it. So when I go and approve this request, just takes me back through to the screen and I'll hit give access. Now it's going and posting that DAT, the domain authentication token back. And here I've got a list of all of my albums that live within my Windows Live space. So if we jump back out to spaces here and we just go, this is the same set of albums down here. So what I could do now is, I'll just go back to this site. I could go and select TechEd EMEA here. And an interesting thing we've done is, because this is doing server-to-server calls, like they may take half a second or a few seconds, depending on what you're doing. What I did was I used a lot of ASP.NET AJAX. So the reason I have this video up here was to show you that as I'm making these requests, the video keeps playing because I'm using ASP.NET AJAX. So it's kind of an interesting just combination. So when you're doing server-to-server calls and you want to keep the user entertained, put some video, put a Silverlight app there, put it outside the update panel, and it'll make them think your service isn't slow. So we'll just go back to this TechEd EMEA one. It's just loading about 30 or 40 photos here. So what I want to do, or what's happening here, is it's going and getting the photos, and then it's displaying a little preview of them. So it's displaying a little preview, and I'm just using another thumbnailing technology here. But this gives me the name of the photo, it gives me the caption that was uploaded into my Windows Live space. Then in this scenario, I can just choose to fix it. And what that will do is that will stream the existing photo down, so the original from Spaces. And it will also stream or use just a local library, insert custom code here that goes and does some fixing. And just for this scenario, I've gone and used PixTwix, which is a third-party library, and I'm using their demo software. So this is a nice little plug for PixTwix for giving me something cool to show. So I've got this little photo here, and I say, hey, that's a great photo. I want to go and persist this back into Spaces. So I'll just go and hit accept fix, and this is now uploading that photo back into Spaces just via a put. And now it's gone and been persisted, it's gone and refreshed here. We see that it's updated. If I jump back into Spaces now, and I hit F5, then it's gone and updated that photo in Spaces. So this is just a scenario showing the gets, the puts, and then if I feel that I broke that photo, that whatever I did on that website broke it, I can just come back here and I can choose to delete it. And that's going and dropping the photo from Spaces. So now when I run it, it should say your photo's now been deleted. So no photos exist in this album. So I could also have something down the side there that says create album and drag and drop photos between albums. I could do some cool stuff with this, but this is just the operations that we get on the API. So let me show you how this was built out. So I'll just close the app. I'll just run it in debug mode now. So just switch it back over to angustest1.com. It's just going to load again. Okay. So here, what we're doing is we're using a JavaScript function to go and generate the URI for this. Now, the reason we're using JavaScript is it's a little bit easier to go and get the current page's URI than it is to go and get it server side. So we're just using JavaScript here, and we're just grabbing the window location because if you're running it on your local dev environment, then it gets confused between localhost and the fully qualified domain name. Now, when I go out and I grant the permission, I'll just use my debug domain. Actually, I'll use this one. So when I go out and grant the permission here, we post back to the page, and I've just got a method here called process the permission granting return. And I'll release some of this code either on my blog or within Codeplex. But we just go and grab this. I showed you this in the interactive SDK. And then I go and persist this back within a session variable. So this could be persisted within the user profile store if I wanted to. Now, all we do on the page is we just check whether a domain authentication token is present. If it's present and we're not actually posting back, then we choose to set up the albums. I've got a little object here called album that goes and has a couple of properties like href and the display name. And I can go and spin up this object here. I get the path of the service. So I've got something that generates the path. Oh, let me just open that. So I've got the path here. And all I do here is I just mash together the server name, the service name that we want, so the photos, and then the owner handle. Now, down below here, we've got a bunch of XML handling stuff. So what that prop find command did, just drill into prop find. What prop find did is it wrapped a lot of the WebDAV GUI for us. So we go and spin up a request against that path that we had, and we embed an authorization header. So this is where we go and embed the domain authentication token. Now, the reason we do this, and this is back to your question of why can't I just get the images straight from Spaces? The reason we put the domain authentication token in the header instead of the query string is so it can't be cached by any proxy servers. Because it's SSL, the headers are protected, so it can't get pulled out. So you're not transferring that domain authentication token around. We just specify the depth of content to go and fetch. Then we just do a get here. Oh, sorry, we're executing the request, and that will go and list all of the albums. So let's just keep going through here. And then I just bind these up and I add them into the object. So I read all of these properties, I add them against an album object, and that's the way we go and render the albums. So now we've got all of these albums down the side here. So if I go and grab something like Angus's photos, then all this does is it just goes and grabs the album URI. So the album URI is really the key object. So everything hangs off the URI, so the address that you go and use to query, or you go to delete, or you go to update. And now all we do here is we just go and list all of the photos against that album. So I'll just jump into this a little bit more. And you see that I've used a bunch of objects just to make it easy to go and code against this. And I'll be releasing all this code, so you don't need to write a lot of the GUI that I've written before. So this has just gone and got all of the photos for that object. Oh. And it's gone and listed them here. Now what's actually being executed is image ASPX. And I'll show you what's happened here. So in the default .aspx that goes and renders this, what I've done is I've just set up an image tag that uses an ASPX as a handler. And the reason I used an ASPX is that IntelliSense actually works in ASPX and it doesn't work in handlers in Beta 2 of Visual Studio. So all I'm doing here is I'm just passing in a couple of parameters. So for this listing page, I want it to be thumbnailed. And the URI that we need is the photo URI, which is returned back by that data set. So now this handler goes and executes a query. So it spins up the photo. It checks whether we actually want to do the fixing, which is my local logic. And then it goes and grabs the photo and gets the original. So this is just spinning up a binary stream. Now, the thumbnailing functionality, we're adding server-side, and that should be out in a couple of days. But this just goes and executes the request, and then it goes and outputs that into the binary stream, or into the response stream. So let me just step out. So we're just going and rendering this back into the current context response stream. And that is how we go and render all of the photos. And then to go and do the updates, let me just skip over this. To go and do the update here, so the accept fix, all I do is execute the fix. I just get the binary stream of the fixed one. I then go and choose to update it, and this just goes and executes a put with overriding to force, and then we just stick that stream in the request stream, and it goes and posts the fix back. So that's how we do the getting, we do the rendering of the photos using a local handler, and then we go and push it back. So you're pushing a lot of binary streams around, but this is the stuff we need to do with the private photos. All right, so how do we go and revoke permission? Say I don't like a website anymore. Like they get hacked, it's in the public, or they start doing something nasty, or they open up their social networking pages so they can be indexed and you don't want that anymore. How do you go and revoke all of these permissions? There's a screen called the permission revoking user experience, what we call the PRUX. So I'm just going to apply my debug domain authentication token. And this screen here, revoke, goes out to /PRUX, permission revoking user experience. And one of the things we're looking at writing into the terms of use is that if you ask a user to grant permission, you must give them the option to revoke permission as well. And then all this does is it just lists every site, so every domain, and then each of the ACLs, so the service, and then the read-write, or the ACL that we've allocated against that. So I could go and drop this, for example. So I could, if I drop all of these, and I start to click around, yeah, if I drop all of these and I use the domain authentication token that I had before, then I get an error. I get a 401. I just realized I've just ruined Koji's demo because he's doing this in Las Vegas at the same time. Sorry, Koji. Yeah, well, he'll have a rude awakening in a couple of minutes. So the business terms on this is the APIs that we have in the platform. We have a threshold of 1 million unique users per month, and that's averaged across 3 months. So put on your math hats, but that's so if you've got 500,000 users on month 1, and then you get slash dotted, and you get, I don't know, 1.5 million users, and then month 3 you have 500,000 users, and that averages less than 1 million UUs for 3 months. So we won't charge you. But over 1 million UUs, you're one of 5,000 websites around the world. So you're a fairly big website already. So what we want is an exchange of value. So what that is typically going to be is 25 cents US per user per year. Or we do different monetization options around advertising, and instead of you cutting us a check, we cut a check to you. So there's a couple of different ways we're thinking about this. But all of these terms are up at dev.live.com. So you can go up there and see what we've done. We announced these in I think March or April at the Mix07 conference, and we haven't needed to change them since. So we're going to stick by these terms. So just in summary, there is a massive amount of data up in the Windows Live services, in address books, like your Messenger buddy list is your real social network. It's the people you talk to. We've got a lot of data in the photo store. We're making it easier for users to go and put all of their photos up there so they can upload new photos through Photo Gallery. So we've got all of this data. We're opening it up, and it's not new that this data's been open. It's new that we're doing this securely. That websites that ask usernames and passwords from users, they're bad. That's a really bad place to be in. So we want users to get trained to start to enter their creds in login.live.com, delegate permission so they can revoke it at a later date. And then also, all this stuff is in alpha, but it's in alpha at scale. So we've got a couple of different ways of thinking about stuff. It's either in alpha running on 2 boxes, or it's in alpha running on a whole lot of boxes. Beta it's basically in production, but we don't know how to charge you. And 1.0 is it's in production and we've got all the business terms figured out. So it's in production right now in alpha, if that makes sense. So it's good code and it's running at scale. So you'll run out of bandwidth before you take our boxes down. So with that said, if you have any questions, please yell them out. We've got a couple of minutes before I'm going to get booted out of this room. Yes, sorry. Yeah. So the question is, if you're thirdparty.com and a user revokes permissions they granted you, do you get notified? No. No. That's a cool feature request though. But it's the same, it's kind of analogous to a user changing their password. So it's just something that you handle. So if you get an error, then you stick a little flag in your database, and the next time the user signs in, you're like, hey, did you change your password? Did you revoke my permission? Are we still friends? And then you determine, and then either the user grants you permission or you stop asking them. Yeah. But how would you want to be notified as well? Would you just want to ping back on an HTTP port or a message in BizTalk services, or? Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how we're looking, like what we're investigating around that, but I think it is something that we would look at. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, how far are we going to go with this? So we want to open it up. Like there's plans to do something else that was just launched recently that's going to go behind this delegation model. Like I'm talking to Remy about putting Silverlight streaming behind delegation, like so you could grant a website permission to CRUD on your account. Like now that we have this infrastructure, we have this front door, we have this kind of bridge, we want a lot of services behind it. So we are looking at it. And the cool thing is that the modular way that our infrastructure behind the scenes has been put together, we can just plug back-end services into it. Because like, getting a bit kind of internal now, but when you go and log in with Live ID, then you get a Live ID cookie that contains a token, and that opens up the services. So these all use a common way of reading lots of different cookies and tokens and all of that. So when we front door it, it's really simple for us to plug these in behind the services. So if there's something that you really want, like jump up and down. I don't think the Hotmail guys will be too forthcoming with us delegating email though, but other stuff, I mean, it's a cool service we've got. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, the protocols we're using here, is this the same as Astoria? And are we aligning on Astoria? So I don't know if you were here during my public service announcement, but I was going to show Astoria, and I apologize to everyone about that because it was in the printed abstract. We were going to show Astoria because the bits were aligned, and then they slipped out of date, like one slipped. And I'll keep you guessing whether it was us or them. But basically, it would make sense for us to do that. I'm not an Astoria guru, so I'm not gonna tell you whether we're doing that or not. Pablo Castro is around, like the tech lead for Astoria, so you should go and grab him. I don't know if he's done his session yet, but he is definitely somewhere here. Just go to the Hilton and ask for Pablo. You've been to his session already? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So we're definitely looking at it, and I would be surprised if it is not, if it doesn't come true. It's just no, it's not going to take a few years. Like, it will, whenever Astoria ships, we should have something there, but I'm not like guaranteeing it. Yo, at the back. Okay, are we looking at combining the Live ID web authentication SDK with the permission granting UX? If you used Live ID web authentication on thirdparty.com, then when you clicked delegate permission, it wouldn't ask you to sign in with Live ID. So that's one kind of benefit. But in terms of actually folding the SDKs together, we're not sure where that sits on the roadmap yet. Internally, there is discussions around the delegation stuff and the web authentication. They're kind of close in terms of it's delegating a small amount of your information, so a unique user identifier for that site. But I'm not sure whether we will actually fold them together or not. Any more questions, or can you all go and grab a tea and coffee? Well, thank you very much for turning up at 9 a.m. And go and check out dev.live.com. And that little photo sample, I'll make sure that I ship that in like a week or so. Cool. Thanks, guys.